Hey everyone. Hey Edith. My
Hey,
name is
John.
Astasia Myers and I'm an enterprise investor at Redpoint Ventures. Redpoint is very humbled to have partnered with some incredible SaaS founders, including those at Looker, Zora, Zendesk, Snowflake, among others. Today, we'll be discussing how the shift in remote work requires a different leadership and company culture with Edith Harbaugh, the co-founder and CEO of LaunchDarkly. Thank you so much for joining us, Edith. Do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
I'm Edith Harbaugh. I'm CEO and co-founder of LaunchDarkly. The company was founded in 2014 with John Kodemol, our CTO. We both had this strong belief that software powers the world and that there are needs for tools like LaunchDarkly to help all teams deliver and control that software. So now we have 1,500 customers worldwide. We have huge, I call them stalwarts like Intuit, Northern Trust, who depend on us to get the right feature to the right person at the right time. We also have up and coming startups that I also love working with, one of which is Hopin, who we're using for this conference, and Troops AI.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the introduction. It is absolutely incredible that you're 6 years into your journey and have already reached incredible scale. You kind of alluded to it before. 20 trillion feature flags served to users, 340,000 servers reached daily, and over 1,000 customers. What has been some of the biggest challenges in scaling the LaunchDarkly business? You know, this is especially important now because some founders are dealing with the pandemic and they're very early in their journeys. What have been some of the biggest lessons that you've learned during the pandemic thus far?
Well, so we wrote down our values very early when we were an 8-person company. And I think that really helped us a lot. So one of our core values is learn and grow. And I honestly fall back on that one a lot. You know, in terms of things are always changing at a startup. And you can either say, well, I wish they were back when we were all together and we could do an all hands in person, which I dearly miss. Or you could say, things are different now and we have to change. And I really try to reinforce that with the team. It's funny because, as you said, we've been around for 6 years, that sometimes people kind of fantasize about this mythical good time. And I'm like, no. Things are so much better. Like, things are so much better now. We have so many more resources.
Right.
So going back to the pandemic, one of the first things that surprised me was we loved doing our all hands all together, or I loved them. When we started doing them remote, our remote employees for the first time said, I actually felt included.
Oh, that's great.
Like before, awesome. It was like the 25% of the team that wasn't in the room that was kind of like, well, we kind of heard what was going on. People laughed at jokes. But making us all remote forced us to be inclusive of a truly remote experience.
That's fantastic, especially since you've started to open other offices across the US and the world. It's wonderful to hear that these other employees are now feeling more included in the company culture at LaunchDarkly. I really like your point around staying inquisitive, staying with this learning mind, because you're right, at every stage of a startup, you're going through different growing pains to get to that next phase. So love that company culture. So one thing that's always been incredible about you, just as a person, is that you're an incredible runner and athlete. I mean, you've done 100-mile trail runs, marathons, you've cycled across the US. You know, is this more of a way for you to de-stress or push yourself? And do you think any of the skills that you learn from accomplishing these athletic feats translate into your work?
Yeah, I kind of flip-flop between running and cycling. I think they do give me a target and a goal. I think they're also very good for life lessons. You know, so I've run over 20 marathons. I've run over a dozen 50 miles, but moving up to 100 miles was a big change where I basically had to retool a lot of things. Like I got a professional coach. I got a woman who actually had the world record at 100 miles. Wow. I retooled how much time I was going to spend on it. I retooled how I thought about a goal, and I failed twice three before I did it. So it was good mental discipline. I think the part that's applicable to a startup is, especially in a pandemic, and as I said, 6 years in, you can't sprint your way to success.
Right.
Like,
Great point.
You gotta take care of the team. You gotta. I hate the Silicon Valley culture of let's code until 4 a.m. and crush everything. I'm like, well, sleep is a key resource.
Totally.
Like, there's going to be that time when, yes, you need to get up early, like I did today for this, but like that,
there's a balance.
You should be treating your team in a way that when they need to dig deep, they have that resource.
Mm-hmm.
And if every day you're just at exhaustion, you don't have that stamina.
Totally. It seems like there's so many skills that you learn from, pushing yourself athletically. 1, goal setting. 2, getting used to grit. 3, getting used to failure, but getting back up and trying again, that personal motivation. It seems like it's been a really great practice for you, and lots of things have actually translated to how you think about LaunchDarkly. I know you guys are always raising the bar of what is considered great performance. And, there are ups and downs on every company journey, but to continue to have kind of a mission statement and a goal seems like great parallel between your personal efforts and what you're doing at LaunchDarkly.
Yeah. I think another of our core values is, take care of yourself. Work is not life.
Right. That work-life balance, it can be so crucial. You definitely don't want people to be burning out with long days. You want them to be excited and contributing and making sure that they can be part of the long journey that you guys are on.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that has been impressive is because you have been at this for 6 years, you've achieved success on so many different stages, both at LaunchDarkly and in your past roles in life. What do you think were some of those defining moments that led you to be the leader you are today?
It's a good question. So I started off in engineering. I was an engineer in an enterprise company called Epicentric, which got acquired by Vignette. I got some patents on deployment from that. And then I was a product manager at an enterprise company. And this was back when you had like a 2 to 3 year cycle, and it was just very slow.
Yeah.
So I decided I wanted to be a consumer product manager, and I went to work for Monster.com, and it was fun, but it really challenged me. Like, nice. In a consumer world, like we had a weekly dashboard about how we'd done. Like we had a monthly dashboard, and I as product manager was held accountable for it. Like when I joined, my boss, Ann Dwayne, who's this wonderful woman who went on to be COO of Chegg and take them public, gave me my 30, 60, 90-day objectives. And one of them was increase revenue by 15%. And I asked, how do I do this? And she's like, you're the product manager. Build a top-down, bottom-ups model and figure out the lever. And so it's great. Like, this is before SaaS was really a thing, that I built this, bottoms-up model of like, how much traffic do we get a day? How does it convert? What are our levers? Mm-hmm. And I figured out that we could optimize the flow of our application and make more money. So this worked perfectly in a spreadsheet world.
Nice.
The thing as a product manager is that you have 0 people that work for you usually. Like the joke is you're the CEO of the company, but nobody works for you. I had to convince the rest of the team that, this really working app that we're doing really well, that we could make some changes. And it didn't work. Like I had spearheaded this huge initiative to get better conversion, and it didn't work. And I did the classic product manager thing of trying to argue my way out of it, saying, well, it's seasonality.
Right.
And then our paid traffic manager, because we're paid about $1 million a month, is like, it is not seasonality. Google is sending us the same traffic every day, and I'm paid $1 million. And we had to fix it. Mm-hmm. And that was just such a great leadership lesson in terms of metrics matter, getting buy-in, and being humble about when you make a mistake. The final twist was the reason why we didn't really do a great job A/B testing it is because frameworks back then didn't really exist. Like I wanted to make this massive change, and we just had to do a hard cutover. I knew that the bigger companies like Facebook and Google had a platform where they could roll out incremental features, do a test, target different traffic. And we were too small to have that platform. It was really frustrated. So from that kind of came the genesis of LaunchDarkly. It was like every PM should have the platform to be able to safely and easily innovate, because you can't stand still. You have to try new things, but also to do it safely.
Right. That's awesome. That's such a great story, because it speaks to your learnings being a product manager at a different type of company, the value of teamwork, persuasion, and alignment, the ability, once again, a theme here being like, it's okay to fail, to learn from those experiences and grow from them so you can be a better teammate and leader. But it also is great because it actually gave you this nugget of like what you could build to help other teams like yours. And that's something that we love to look for in founders. And one of the reasons we got so excited about you is you had this personal pain that you wanted to do, feature flags and experimentation and A/B testing, because you were at a company that you knew that would benefit hugely from it. And you took that to become LaunchDarkly. That's such a wonderful story. Something that we always hear about with LaunchDarkly is the incredible and special culture that you've built there. One thing that's interesting, you were so hands-on as an engineer and PM in your last roles, and then in the early days as a CEO, firsthand that talent is incredibly important, but you can't just hire more engineers to grow. How do you think about hiring future leaders, and what things do you look for in these types of candidates that show their potential?
That's a great question. We're 200 plus people now. So the people we're hiring now are different than the people we had back then, though most of our early employees are still with the company.
Oh, fantastic.
A screening question I ask people when they're looking at joining LaunchDarkly is, I don't ask, have you worked at a startup before? Because everybody has a different idea of what a startup is.
Right.
Like, they think it's Google, or they think, what I ask is, what's the smallest company you've worked at?
Mm-hmm.
And what did you like and dislike about it?
Mm-hmm.
That really uncovers how much process and change people are comfortable with. If they say, I've never worked at a company bigger than 20 because I just like, not having a lot of departments, and I just like everything being awesome and fluid. Like, okay, you're who we would perhaps have hired 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, now, if they say, hey, I like structure, but I also like having some freedom, that's more of a fit at a 200 plus person company.
That makes a lot of sense. So what I like about that too is that terminology can be confused and interpreted differently by different people. Even today, I have people saying like, oh, I work at a startup, I work at Airbnb. And it's like, well, maybe, maybe in some version that's still a startup, right? Kind of what you were talking to. It's really about trying to quantify and distill what that term really means to a person. So in your example, saying, the size of the company and what you liked and disliked to better qualify potential candidates for leadership there. Given that you just talked about the kind of the persona of people you were looking for in the early days is a little different than now. I bet you also had to go through an evolution as a leader where, in the early days, you were managing a lot of the processes and people yourself. And then as you grew, you probably had to delegate more of those responsibilities. How do you think about which kind of growth lanes you wanted to focus on as you scaled? And are there any tips that you would pass on to other ICs that are growing into a manager?
Yeah, when we were an 8-person company, I ran payroll. I called our HR company. I went to City Hall to file our doing business as. I was not a glamorous CEO. Mm-hmm. As we got bigger, what I just wrote down is jobs to be done. Like I used to build the financial models for the company because I knew how to do it and there wasn't anybody around.
And you were great. I just want to give Edith a whole bunch of credit. Some of the best models we saw were the ones that I've worked on Edith with. So you were very skilled at it too. So.
But it was one of those things as we got bigger. It was right around when we raised our B and we're growing to 20, from 20 to beyond. I'm like, I'm good at this. I know how to do it. I'm not the best person to do it anymore. Like, we need to get a professional VP of finance who owns this, because this is not a core competency that I need to have right now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
That's a great point, because it's like I have to say, you were so good at this modeling, and you could have done it for much longer in terms of the business, but you just appreciated that you needed an expert and that your skills could be better leveraged in other domains.
When you're 200 plus, your model takes more work than 8 people also.
Yeah, exactly. So something that has been really interesting is that you talk about a lot of people at the company who started with you early on are still at LaunchDarkly, and then you complemented them with new talent. How do you think about training these employees to grow into leadership roles, and kind of what are the techniques you and the team have used? And how do you think the team has been doing, given that we're operating COVID now, where it may not be an in-person experience anymore?
There were things we were doing pre-COVID that have served us well. Everybody gets a 30-60-90 plan.
Great.
You know, whether you're a BDR or new VP of revenue, you get a 30-60-90. And people really seem to like this because it sets expectations on both sides.
Right.
Here is where I expect you to be. And also here are all these resources to help you. We've supplemented with professional training. We're using Life Labs right now, which people really seem to like for manager training. And also doing frequent performance reviews and using Culture Amp. I saw the Culture Amp talk earlier and appreciated it.
Nice. So it sounds like a mix of different techniques. One is the 30-60-90 review plans. It sounds like you received that in one of your past roles and really like the alignment of goals, specifically if you're a manager, kind of appreciating ways you could help your teammate ramp up and upskill, complemented by manager and leadership training. I'm curious, some companies have like peer groups that they organize to align people and bring them together. Does LaunchDarkly have that aspect as well?
I want to loop back for a second on the training. Everybody also gets $2,500 a year for training.
Oh, great.
I myself used it. I went to general management class, and then that set off a wave where everybody else went also, even down to like the BDR people. They wanted to learn. I think that's part of our culture, is that it's not seen as a punishment. Like, it's not, hey, you're bad at this. It's a treat of, we want you to be up-leveled, and we're here to support you in that journey.
Gotcha. But it's also, you led by example as well, which I really appreciate. You kind of walk the walk and talk the talk with the management training, which is fantastic. Well, I know that we are at time now. I want to thank everyone that's joining us remotely for tuning in. And also, Edith, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure working with you, and really appreciate your thoughts.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Edith and Astasia. Fantastic, really insightful conversation. Fantastic founder and great investor there. And I know you're staying for afters with Astasia and Edith, so really appreciate that. That'll start in about 20 minutes in the sessions area. So for those of you that got any questions for both, let's go to that interactive session in about 20 minutes time. So thanks so much for being the penultimate guest of today's SaaStock Remote.